Hi, I'm Alan Coulthard, and welcome to a series of interviews with DJ legends. And my guest today is one of the DJs who influenced me most in the 80s, Mr. Ben Liebrand, a Dutch DJ, remixer, and producer who now lives in Canada. Hi, Ben, how are you?
Good, very good. You?
Yeah, I'm fine, actually.
Keeping healthy in these strange times?
I put on a few pounds, to be honest, as everyone has in lockdown. I don't know whether you have. What's lockdown been like for you?
Well, we moved to Canada in 2010, and we live like in the middle of nowhere here. So it is just the hills and everything that flies and walks around here, but not many people. So I only really notice what's going on when we have to go into town and we have to do shopping and stuff. And even then, the little town we are the closest to, it has so many supermarkets and so many shopping. So it is a bother, but it is not a real inconvenience. It hasn't been since it started in mid-March. So all good.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting the last few weeks as well. Strange time lockdown. You either struggle with it, and a lot of people are having a difficult time, or you do something a bit different, which is what I've done.
Well, I've been incredibly busy and not even had time to really think about, how at the moment, I've been so engulfed with the work that, I don't even have time to sit around to see how it affects me. And basically, it sounds like an odd comparison, but it's like the weather. I mean, I can't do anything to change it. So I'm just taking it as it is, and I'm just try to be as relaxed as possible, because what can you do? I mean, you can wind yourself up, but that will only, be detrimental to your own health. So just take it as the weather. Just wait until it drifts by, and it will drift by as long as the clock keeps ticking. This also will pass. So just wait for that.
Okay, I can see your wonderful studio behind you. Do you want to give us a little idea of what equipment you've got? I'm sure people watching this will be interested.
Yes, so I'll lift this thing up. I'll start the way back there, and that's a wall which has a lot of vintage recording equipment from back in the day when stuff was still analog, like, for example, the Studer A80 in the corner. Then slowly going to digital with Akai, digital editing machines, digital recording machines. So part of that is still functional, and a lot of that is out of use because everything kind of moved into the box. The box being, in my case, Apple computers. My main setup is over here, where I've got a main screen and two additional screens to do all my work. Most of the work is done in Logic and Ableton, and I do a lot of visual stuff. Some of the visual stuff is done on this one. There's an additional machine back there. That's this one over here. Let me point, yeah, right about there. And then I have another computer in the corner here, which is doing the 3D work. So that one's rendering at the moment as well. And the rest of the studio, I've got a couple of big baffle screens to get my acoustics right, synthesizers, turntables in that corner, and I also have my big collection with all the stuff I like to collect over the years, starting from the Thunderbirds all the way to the latest. Everything kind of sci-fi related is in that rack, and yeah, it's kind of my collection rack.
And this is in your house, isn't it? In your house?
Yeah, this is in the lower level of our house here. Yeah, peek outside. So this is my view outside, and I've got a lot of daylight in the studio, and then obviously also obligatory award wall, the wall of fame there with my gold and silver and platinum.
We've lost you there, but Ben. Oh, you're back.
You're back. Okay. Anyways, I've also got my my wall where I have my my awards, the gold, silver, platinum discs for productions and releases I had over the years. And it's a very pleasant space to work. And yeah, it's not a curse to be here.
No, it looks great. So let's go back in time then, to when you actually got into DJing, which I think was about 76, if I've done my research correctly.
Yeah, 76. It was basically for me a love for music and a love for technology. So it always went hand in hand. I know there are a lot of DJs that you know, they love the DJ idea but never get into what does this, how does this work, what does it make it tick, what's the necessary equipment, what's the necessary stuff I need to do for that. And for me it has always been equally interesting to occupy myself with the music and the equipment with which to either play out the music or record the music. And I think that has led me already back in 1976 to come up with a DJ setup. And I made a kind of a unit which was very much suited for drive-in purposes, but we only took it out once. And that one time somebody put a drink on the corner, and I was like, okay, that's it. You know, it's the equipment is my, yes, it's one of my biggest loves. So I'm not going to risk that by some punter dropping a beer into my turntables or mixer or whatever. So that setup only went out of on the road just once, and gradually went on from there, improving all the equipment, getting my first tape deck, making my first tape edits, but already back then making sure that it was a 2-track recorder, that it ran at the highest speed. So I've been not just a bit, but a proper nerd with when it comes to that. Already starting in 1976.
Because you were quite young then, weren't you, in 76?
16.
Wow, amazing.
16,
but you didn't actually beat mix at that time, because it was really difficult to beat mix in 76, wasn't it? Because all the live...
I started beat mixing in 1979, and actually the DJ, it was a Dutch DJ who just came back from the States. His name was Hype Louter, and he was doing some of the first beat mixes I ever heard. And the only thing that kind of caught me back then, that he was playing some records too fast. And I was like, why is he doing that? And only afterwards, you know, it became apparent that he was doing beat mixing. Right at that time, I spotted on Vanguard Records these numbers, you know, followed by this abbreviation BPM, and didn't have a clue what BPM meant. But I did see that the slower records had, in this case, it was Players Association, Turn the Music Up.
Oh, I love that song.
Hey, and it was like, and then I looked up another one, and then it went to 132 on that other one. And then I was like, would those numbers mean that this is the tempo of the record? And yes, it meant exactly that. And that's when I started beat mixing in 1997 on 2 Dual, like, what is it, German or Swiss? I don't even know. Dual turntables, which are horrendous for beat mixing, because, you know, if you gaze at them in the wrong way, your needle already skips. But that's how I started beat mixing. And at home, I had 2 simple Philips turntables, which did have pitch control, and which I modified that they wouldn't, you know, the arm wouldn't lift. And yeah, started beat mixing back then. And in 1980, moving to a new club, I came across these great-looking turntables in basically, I don't know how you would call a store like that, but it would be a store where they sell washing machines, dryers, toasters, some stereo stuff, And this particular one also had a Dual and a Technics SL1200 MK2.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw the turntable. I loved the design, and I thought that pitch fader, it must be handy. And do keep in mind, this was I'm thinking the summer of 1980. There was no internet, there was no DJ scene,
No.
there were no DJ magazines, there was no, for me, no way to know what is going on in the rest of the world. The only thing I knew was like, I liked the design of this turntable, and I thought that huge pitch fader for pitch must be handy. So that was the only that fueled my decision to get these turntables. And yeah, it was a great choice. So and from then on, it became a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was doing the same sort of thing, really. A little bit later, actually. It was 81 that I was mixing properly with turntables for SL1500s I used. There were a lot of people doing similar things at roughly the same time. I think you were before many of the people actually with beat mixing, but very interesting the way the mixing developed, I think, probably from America. I know America was doing beat mixing about the 77, 78, so I'll probably get proved wrong soon. But you then moved into remixing with Rock the Boat your first remix, or had you been doing remixes before then with Forest?
The way it worked was that in 1980, I got to spin in a new club in my hometown, Nijmegen, and for that club, I was actually out in the town to get turntables, and that's how I got the first SL1200s. And that club had a couple of peculiar things how all that developed. So somebody was supposed to DJ in that club, Hype, the guy I mentioned before, but he was like, it's just too much for me because the club is going to be open 7 days a week. Anyways, Hype declined and said, you have to get Ben Liebrand there because nice upcoming DJ, try him. So I started in this club, got the SL1200 turntables, and started DJing in this club, which at the end of the opening night turned out to be a gay club. I didn't know. But at the end of the night, Theo came up to me and said, how did you like it? I said, well, I love the atmosphere and I love that I could spin anything I wanted. But there weren't too many girls, were there? Yes, we forgot to mention. Yes, we forgot to mention. It's a gay club. Okay, gay club. Anyways, the nice thing about this club was I could spin anything, really anything I wanted. And because I could spin anything I wanted, we were months ahead of the charts. I could, by the time stuff was getting in the top 40, I was already moved on to the next stuff. So the club also got a bit of a name of, if you want to hear what's going to be hot in a couple of months, and back then it was still like 2 months. You can't imagine now, but you were 2 months ahead of the charts. And so the club was visited by the guys from The Limit, and they had their hit with Say Yeah. And these guys lived in Nijmegen. They visited the club, and that was the first connection I had with somebody who actually recorded music. I was spinning a version there, an edit I made from Human League, Don't You Want Me? And in Human League, Don't You Want Me, you have the first verse where he tells what he thinks, and then you have the second verse where she kind of answers to all the stuff. And I made an edit where he says something, she answers. He says something, she answers. He says something, she answers. So it was something that really stuck out because, even though the track was new, it was so different from the regular version. And Rob and Bernard, they noticed and they said, so what is this? I said, well, it's an edit I made. And, so you do edits? Yeah, well, we're working on a production right now. It's called She's So Divine. Would you want to do the 12-inch edit for that? That was my first assignment. That was my first release. That got me in contact with record companies in Hilversum, which is kind of the musical hub in the Netherlands for radio stations, record companies, and God knows what. And that was the first assignment. That got me into contact with the record companies in Hilversum. We're talking about 1982. On Monday, I was doing She's So Divine. On Friday, I delivered my tape in Hilversum. Friday, I got my second assignment. And the week after, I got the first assignment to do a production. So it went from hardly anything to,
Wow.
100 miles an hour, just 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And the reason I was able to pull that off was because since I started in the music, I had, I was a nerd. So by the time people asked me to do an edit, I knew how to do an edit. I knew I should do it on this kind of machine, that they pre-record all the stuff. I had a vocal version, instrumental version, and a whole lot of outtakes so that I could edit the edit from the studio recorded version. So my version would be studio quality. And all that knowledge was already there. And that made it possible for me to, when people asked, can you do an edit? I can do an edit. And I knew how to do it. And I knew how to do it on studio quality. So that was a great help. That got me in contact with the company of the Two Peters, record company in Hilversum. And Forest Rock the Boat was actually the second production I did for them, based on a kind of a mashup I was spinning in the club in Nijmegen. So the first one was actually Rock the Boat. And at that time, Forrest wasn't available to be the artist because he was still signed to a band. Well, he was part of a band back then. So that one got released under another name, but it is Forrest's voice on the production. So then we made Rock the Boat, and when Rock the Boat neared completion, it was like, man, your voice is awesome, your performance is awesome, your dancing is awesome, you have to perform this. We can't have Julius Green doing this because honestly, Julius Green just looked like, I don't know, he just wasn't the guy. He had no charisma, he couldn't do the moves, and he couldn't sing because he wasn't the guy who sung the track in the first place. That brought me to Forest Rock the Boat. That was in 1982. And as I said, being a nerd helped me tremendously into the position where when people actually asked me to do stuff, I could do stuff.
But it was quite helpful, I think, that you were a DJ, because Rock the Boat, I think, has got one of the most amazing breaks, because I used it all the time, like a conga break, which literally lasts forever, doesn't it? Do you know the bit I mean? Yeah. And that's presumably done so that DJs could mix out of it.
Yeah, so it had a couple of, it had elements in there from Nick Straker. I mean, not sampled because we're talking 1982, and I don't even think we had a sampler back in the studio back then. I mean, not even a synclavier, not even. No. So it was actually the sound was the actual claptrap, a thing that the sound that Nick Straker band also used for clap. So it's a thing called clap, which makes that sound. And I programmed the Linn drum on that. And it's funny to know that the 12-inch of Rock the Boat is actually an edit because the actual multi-track recording is even longer. I mean, the way we recorded on multi-track, it was like, I think a 9-minute take. And even edited some parts out to make it a little bit more compact because, the actual multi-track recording, if you let that roll, it's like 9 minutes long. And we just put everything in there. We had a tremendous percussionist called Eddie Cunard. He did all the percussion, he did the congas, everything on there. He did the timbales, and we did have the Simmons in there, so we played around with that, and it was just a great thing to do. And it was John Tilley, he was the co-producer, And back then, I was the guy just coming in, so I was the rookie. But I was the rookie who played in a club 7 nights a week, because that's how many nights the club in
Wow.
Nijmegen was open.
Yeah.
7 nights a week. So I had exactly my fingers on the pulse, what was going on the dance floor. So it was a producer, John Tilley, who had the studio experience, and me, the rookie back then, having the club connection. And that's how Forest Rock the World came to be.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm actually going to go ask you a question I've always wanted to ask you, actually, which is not related to your timeline of work, but what influences did you have? Which artists influenced you growing up and becoming a remixer and DJ?
Yeah, obviously, also the artists that have a big affinity to electronics and to equipment. And you know, whilst everybody was kind of still dancing along to Saturday Night Fever with all the soulful stuff, I was listening to Giorgio Moroder.
Oh, wow.
And there is another Japanese artist. I hope he's Japanese. I hope I'm not making a mistake here. Isao Tomita. He's a synthesizer. He's like the Asian version of Jean-Michel Jarre. But as synthesizers and sounds go, he surpassed anything and everything that anybody was doing back then. Because
really?
even if you listen to records he made back in 1974 or 1976, the sound, the fullness, the richness of the sound he managed to create with synthesizers, just amazing. And he was doing a lot of cover versions of classic music pieces. So you'd have the Firebird Suite, you'd have Pictures at an Exhibition, you would have The Planets by Holst, all these classical pieces, and he would turn them into electronic versions, but with such rich sound. That influenced me with regards to making something sound rich and full, and not thin and metallic or whatever. And then obviously Giorgio Moroder, because he combined all these great sounds with the dance floor. Kraftwerk, obviously, and also Jean-Michel Jarre. But it is, I think, Giorgio Moroder was probably the most influential, because he brought all that love for electronic music onto the dance floor. And those are my influences.
Great. Let's move back then to your timeline, really. So the next time I really heard of you in the UK was with Holiday Rap, but maybe you want to fill in the gap between Holiday Rap and Rock the Boat.
Well, from Rock the Boat, I started getting into production as well. Basically, I began with just making an edit, like making a flow for a 12-inch edit, taking whatever was recorded with all the outtakes, and I would request a drum pass, and I would request an instrumental pass, and you know, even if I was in the studio myself, I'd make a dub pass, or perhaps also mix down the whole intro section or the break section or whatever. Then I came to adding instruments, and a lot of that stuff happened for a Dutch record company called High Fashion Music. I did a very wacky version of Fun Fun, Happy Station. And that kind of not introduced, but kind of solidified Italo in the Netherlands. And was a huge hit. I have a gold record for that on my wall. And so that was in 1983, 84. Did a lot of stuff for Dureco. And at a certain point, there was this demo floating around by DJ Sven and MC Marco G of their version of the Holiday Rap. And it was a very coarse demo. It was basically an edit made from Holiday, Madonna, and way at the end, kind of almost in the fade, they added in this "We Are Going on a Summer Holiday" by Cliff Richard, and I heard the thing and kind of, as I did with all the other stuff, restructured the 12-inch as I imagined it, and turned the bonus bit at the end, the "We Are Going to Summer Holiday," into the actual chorus, kind of turned it into a structure which you could follow with some beatboxing going on. And for me, the challenge was to re-record Holiday. So I got the album and I saw Jellybean recorded everything, and Jellybean was so kind to note on the album which drum computers he used, which synthesizers he used. So I got together this stuff and I got the DMX and programmed it the way that it should. And you have the drum track, and then looked up all the other synthesizers he was using. Had a keyboard player do that riff, because I couldn't get that out of any of the synthesizers, and he was just a wizard using the Prophet 5. Took him about 5 minutes to exactly replicate that sound. We re-recorded the whole thing. Then Micah G and Sven came in. They did the rap, and basically, a lot of the stuff on there, especially with Micah G, he was just freestyling. He was just doing stuff he had done a million times, and that sounded really great. And we managed to record those parts, mixed the track down, went to the New Music Seminar in New York, came back, and it was a #1.
Wow!
It was actually that trip, going to the New Music Seminar, where DMC also was, and just before I sat down in the plane, I looked over the shoulder of the guy in front of me, and he was holding the entertainment page of the Telegraaf, which is one of the most popular newspapers, holding it open, and it had the charts, the top 40, and on #1 was the freaking Holiday rap. So yeah, and funny enough, back then I was still doing projects with the guys from The Limit, and I remember Rob from The Limit, and he listened to the Holiday rap, and he just turned to me and he says, "This is just too stupid to not be a hit." Right? It turned into a hit.
I think it was around the same time as Into the Groove, wasn't it? Because if I remember, because
Could be.
Yeah, because 85, that's when, Madonna was huge in 85, I think, wasn't she? You mentioned DMC, so let's just talk a little bit about that. So you got involved with DMC in that period of time, from 85 or 86?
Yes, around about that time. But before that, I already had a huge hit with Hot Chocolate, You Sexy Thing. I had hits with Fun Fun, Happy Station, have my award for Rock the Boat Hanging on the Wall. So where DMC was a breeding ground for a lot of DJs getting into the production as well, I was rather established. You know, before I walked the threshold at DMC, I was already rather established with, already a string of top 5 on my name. So it was therefore it was a bit of a different dynamic at DMC.
But it might have helped in the UK a little bit, maybe, or maybe not. Up to you. So just talking a few about a few of the remixes that you did then. So during that period of time, 85 to 87, 88.
Yeah, you shoot. You call one, and you let me know which one that tickles your mind.
Phil Collins, is that around that time?
Yes. So Phil Collins, I'll rewind back to 1983. 1983 was the year where I started a radio show on Dutch radio called In the Mix. It was the first non-stop mixed show on Dutch radio, and I'm not talking about a radio station, but Radio Veronica was the #1 radio station in the Netherlands, with FM spread from each corner, north, south, east, west, everywhere in Holland. Everybody was listening to Radio Veronica, and that radio station, which odd enough had a rock and pop format during the week, switched to a kind of a dance disco format on Friday and Saturday, and I was part of that thing. I was the first DJ given the opportunity to do a non-stop mixed radio show, and again, my nerdness had prepared me to deliver that to the radio station at, well, call it like an incredibly, insanely high BBC standard, with which you had to adhere to be allowed to have your tapes being broadcast on radio. Mm-hmm. So nailed that, and In the Mix started. And as a little sidekick to In the Mix, they introduced the mini mix. And in the beginning, the mini mix was just a 20-minute version of the In the Mix, a kind of a promo to In the Mix, which ran later at night. But the mini mix kind of evolved and kind of compressed, kind of turned into an espresso version of a longer mix. And rather than doing a mega mix for this item, the mini mix, it kind of evolved into making it special from a particular track or a particular artist or a particular whatever was going on. And these mixes were made on Friday, were broadcasted on Friday evening at 10 minutes past 9. So Friday morning at 10 a.m., I would think about what am I going to do today for the mini mix. And this particular Friday morning, I thought, let's do something with In the Air Tonight. So I got the CD version of Phil Collins, made an edit, synced the edit up with the Roland sync box, so I could have my sequencer, my Akai MPC60 running along. And that's how I came up with this version of In the Air Tonight. That's from 10 a.m. in the morning, not having a clue what I'm going to do today, until 8 in the evening, because that was the moment where I actually had to, in real time, record it onto tape, get the tape in the box, jump in the car, drive 100 kilometers to the radio station where it would be broadcasted. That tape, the tape I made then, with my deadline, 8 o'clock is my firm deadline, because if I wait any longer, I won't even have time to have it broadcasted on radio. Mm-hmm. So that was my deadline, and that actual tape is the tape I played at the DJ convention in the Hippodrome in London to about 2,600 DJs. And I told them, if you want this released, call the record company.
Oh, I remember that there.
Yes. And again, think back. This was, what was it, 1988, I think. Mm. And think back at that time. There were people didn't have mobile phones. There was no internet. There was email. And still, I made this remark to 2,600 DJs at the Hippodrome. I stayed at a hotel. I can't remember which hotel it was. I had some hotel in London. And at 12:30 the next morning, Virgin called me in the hotel. No idea how they got in touch. But 12:30 the next day, I had Virgin on the telephone, and it got released. That exact tape, I didn't remaster, I didn't redo anything of it, but that exact tape got used for the 12-inch and the CD version, and that's how In the Air Tonight came to be.
Right. Another one I absolutely loved was Tarja Savel, Love is Contagious. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. That was actually, I think it was a request from Christine. She loved the track. And that was actually a request that came from DMC. Can you do something with Taja Savell on stages? And I did. And funny enough, you asking me now about that track, because on Grand 12 Inches 17, a series I have with Sony, where I kind of aim to preserve 12-inch versions that are worthwhile. Now, for the first time ever, we've been able to get a proper connection to Paisley Park music.
Oh, wow.
And for the first time ever, the actual master of Taja Savell will be available on CD. Because so far it was only the tape that went to England and that came on vinyl, so there are only vinyl copies available.
Yeah.
But this will be the first time that Taja Savell is going to be available in master quality. So yeah, it took a long time.
Yeah, because you doubled the speed, really, didn't you? That you sort of, is that a fair assessment? It was doubled.
Basically, a lot of ballads run at 60 BPM. So if you multiply it by 2, you arrive at 120 BPM. So the track is actually running at its original speed, but the rhythm programming is running at double tempo. So that takes a ballad onto the dance floor.
Brilliant. One more remix to ask about. Lovely Day, Bill Withers, because Bill Withers is really current in the UK at the moment. With
Withers again started off as a mini mix for radio, and to give you an idea, Phil Collins was just a mini mix idea. Same with Bill Withers, same with my remix I did for Sting, An Englishman in New York. So a lot of mixes that have been released on DMC and that have then been picked up by record companies started their life as a Friday morning decision at 10 a.m. What am I going to make for radio today? So same with Bill Withers' Lovely Day. And funny enough, with Lovely Day was made at the same time I did Four Seasons, Over the Night. So I had on my mixing desk, I was right in the middle of doing the mix down of Over the Night, and I had to do a mini mix. But I had so many channels used on my desk, used up for Four Seasons, that I was like, how can I, my whole mixer, it isn't total recall, but my whole mixer is almost entirely occupied by Four Seasons today, but still I have to do a mini mix. So what I did is I took a lot of the sounds, I took the bass sound, I took a lot of the programming I already did, and used the extra spare channels on the right side of my desk to come up with this version of Lovely Day. And in the end, Lovely Day turned out to be a bigger hit than Four Seasons, which also did very well, but Bill Withers really took off.
It's a cowbell I remember from Lovely Day.
Yeah.
Famous.
Yeah.
I have to confess, I was influenced a lot by that remix and did various remixes with that cowbell, and yeah, it was great.